What if I told you the richest human being who ever lived wasn't a tech billionaire, wasn't a European king, and wasn't even close to modern times? He ruled an empire most people have never heard of. He gave away so much gold on a single trip that he single-handedly crashed an entire region's economy for over a decade, and historians still can't agree on a number big enough to describe what he was worth. His name was Mansa Musa, and his story isn't just impressive, it's a story that got written out of the version of history most of us were taught. To understand Mansa Musa, you first have to understand the empire he inherited, because it wasn't some minor kingdom. The Mali Empire, at its height in the 14th century, stretched across a massive portion of West Africa, covering parts of what we now call Mali, Senegal, Guinea, Niger, and beyond. It was, by land area, one of the largest empires on Earth at the time, and it wasn't wealthy by accident. Mali sat directly on top of and controlled trade routes moving three of the most valuable resources in the medieval world: gold, salt, and copper. At the time, West Africa is believed to have produced roughly half of the world's gold supply. Not half of Africa's gold, half of the entire world's. The empire's wealth came specifically from controlling the trans-Saharan trade routes, the caravan paths that connected West African gold fields to North Africa, and from there, to the Mediterranean and the rest of the known world. Whoever controlled those routes controlled the flow of gold itself, and Mali controlled them completely. By the time Mansa Musa took the throne around 1312, he inherited not just land, but a functioning economic engine that had been generating wealth for generations before him. Mansa itself isn't a name. It's a title, roughly translating to King of Kings or Emperor. Musa's full historical title is often recorded as Mansa Musa I, and under his rule, the Mali Empire didn't just maintain its wealth, it expanded dramatically, both in territory and influence. He was a devout Muslim, and his faith would end up playing a massive role in the story that made him famous outside of Africa. In 1324, Mansa Musa did something that emperors of his stature were expected to do at least once in their lifetime. He set out on the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. Except when Mansa Musa traveled, he didn't travel light. Historical accounts, pieced together from Arab historians and chroniclers who witnessed the journey firsthand, describe a caravan that was almost impossible to comprehend. Estimates vary depending on the source, but the numbers commonly cited include tens of thousands of people accompanying him: soldiers, officials, servants, and a significant number of enslaved people, along with camels carrying massive quantities of gold. Some accounts describe as many as 100 camels, each carrying roughly 300 pounds of gold. Even taking the more conservative historical estimates, the sheer scale of wealth being physically transported across the desert was unlike anything the region had witnessed before. The journey took him through Cairo, and this is where the story becomes almost unbelievable. Mansa Musa didn't just pass through the city. He spent so lavishly, giving away so much gold to the poor, to scholars, to local officials, and in local markets, that he caused a documented economic disruption. The sudden flood of gold caused its value to crash in Cairo and the surrounding region. Prices for goods spiked. The local currency was devalued. And here's the detail historians find almost hard to believe. This wasn't a temporary dip. Some accounts suggest the gold market in Cairo took over a decade to fully recover from the amount Mansa Musa spent during his passage through the city alone. One man's pilgrimage spending altered a regional economy for over 10 years. By the time he reached Mecca and completed his pilgrimage, word of his wealth had already spread across the Islamic world, and, from there, into Europe. Mansa Musa hadn't just gone on a religious pilgrimage, without necessarily intending to. He had just delivered the greatest single demonstration of individual wealth the medieval world had ever recorded. This is where things get genuinely tricky, and it's worth being honest about it. Putting a precise modern dollar figure on Mansa Musa's wealth is extremely difficult, and historians and economists openly disagree on methodology. Some modern estimates that have circulated in popular media have described his wealth in the hundreds of billions of dollars, sometimes framed as equivalent to or more than the world's current wealthiest individuals combined. It's worth noting these specific figures are contested. The sources for his wealth are largely descriptive historical accounts rather than precise records, and converting medieval gold quantities into modern currency involves enormous assumptions. What virtually all historians do agree on is this: Mansa Musa controlled such a significant share of the world's gold supply, and displayed that wealth so dramatically and so publicly, that no verifiable historical figure, and arguably no modern billionaire, has ever demonstrated wealth on a comparable scale relative to the world's total resources at the time. Whether or not you can put an exact number on it, the scale was, by any measure, historically unmatched. Here's the part of this story that stings a little. Following Mansa Musa's pilgrimage, the Mali Empire briefly became genuinely famous in Europe. Mapmakers began including detailed depictions of Mali and its wealthy ruler on world maps. A famous 1375 Catalan atlas even shows Mansa Musa seated on a throne, holding a gold nugget, clearly labeled as the ruler of the region. But over the following centuries, as European colonial narratives about Africa took shape, this history was largely pushed aside. The broader colonial-era portrayal of Africa as a continent without significant pre-colonial civilization, wealth, or organized empires became the dominant narrative taught for generations, despite direct historical and cartographic evidence to the contrary sitting in European archives the entire time. Mansa Musa's story didn't disappear because the evidence vanished. It disappeared because it didn't fit the story that was being told about Africa afterward. The Mali Empire eventually declined, as most empires eventually do, through succession disputes, external pressures, and shifting trade routes. But for a period in history, one African empire controlled such a staggering share of the world's most valuable resource that its emperor's personal spending altered international economies by accident, on a single trip. Mansa Musa wasn't a myth, and he wasn't an exaggeration invented later. He was documented, mapped, and witnessed directly by the merchants and scholars of Cairo in real time. If more people knew this story, I think it would change a lot of assumptions about what history gets remembered, and why. If this surprised you as much as it surprised me researching it, let me know in the comments what other hidden history you want uncovered next.